Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. We have another great event for you today. We're joined today by Laura Gillen. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be with you all again.
Thank you so much for coming back. We've started to get us going to win the House back this cycle. We have endorsed 7 of the candidates who we helped get elected last time. 7 of our 17 that we endorsed won. Laura was one of them. Congresswoman Gillen's one of them. And so we want to just reintroduce you to our community this time because we're out there, and our community has responded enthusiastically, frankly, so far to the fundraising we've done. I've been really proud of everybody. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit again about your journey. How did you get here to Congress? And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what's happening in Washington these days.
Well, thank you again, Simon, for having me on. Thank you all for all your support in my race in 24. So my journey, I was a red to bluer, you may recall, but it didn't start in 24. It actually started in 22 when there was an unexpected retirement from Congress. When Kathleen Rice, who was the Democrat holding the seat back then, decided that she was not going to seek re-election. So I jumped into the race very late. Was not put on red to blue, so didn't get to meet folks like you because I was not
Yeah.
on anybody's radar, and came close but didn't quite make it across the finish line. But I felt like if I stuck with it and I had the chance to build a proper campaign with the proper runway to get the job done, I felt I could be successful. So really never stopped running for Congress from the 22 cycle through the 24 cycle, and just, spent the time raising the money that I needed, spending the time in the community, and really just talking about the issues that were at play and really moving folks in my district, which were not necessarily the same issues that were motivating folks in other districts, but had to really be grounded in my district and meeting people where they are. We had a large constituency driven organizing field program. So making sure I have one of the most diverse districts in the country. So making sure that we were touching every group, talking to them, listening to them, and getting them engaged and knowing what was at stake in the election. So although the 24 election across the country did not go the way we wanted, this was a bright spot. So your investment in my race did pay off because we spent almost every single dollar we had. It was one of the most expensive races in the country. So thank you again. Without your financial support, I would not be sitting here in Congress. And as I like to say, now we have one more vote for the normal.
Well, listen, I mean, just so people know, I mean, 2022 was a disappointing year for us in New York, but 2024 was a great one. We picked up 3 seats. We have one more to get this time in New York 17, Mike Lawler's seat that we need to go get. And so you're here now. This has been an extraordinary time to be in Congress. We have our first leader. I don't call him a president because he doesn't act like an American president, but our first leader who's decided that Congress doesn't really matter and he gets to do whatever he wants. But he has put in front of you a reconciliation bill, and I wonder if you could give us an update on, we're in the throes of it right now, right? I mean, the markups are happening. There have been previous markups. What's your sense today about where they are with the reconciliation bill? Because they're hoping to get it out of committee and on the floor next week.
Yeah, so it's been a wild week with markups. I was just voting on the floor on some suspension bills and a previous question bill, and we had colleagues who have been at Energy and Commerce all night long, and we're going back to the markup. It's been going on and on and on. I think Ag went overnight to Ways and Means. I think went to 4 in the morning. But what I've experienced and what I've been seeing is, there's a clip that went live in one of the committees of a Republican who was asleep during the markup, and they woke him up to vote, and he just woke up and no, because that's what we're dealing with. There's a bill that's coming to the floor this week, and this is nothing to do with reconciliation, but it just kind of gives you a sense of what it's like here. It's a bipartisan bill. It's about providing resources to law enforcement. They invited anyone to make an amendments. I went and testified before the Rules Committee yesterday about, I've had 2 police officers, including one last week, who committed suicide. just in my district at one of our parks. And it was just about making sure that we have more peer-to-peer counseling and mental health resources available to police officers. I mean, this is not controversial at all, not partisan in any way, something that I don't know why anybody would vote against this. But yet my amendment was just voted down by every Republican. And one of my colleagues, Jim McGovern, who is the ranking member in the Rules Committee, that's where I was testifying, said, I don't understand. You asked for amendments. We had a colleague who came for an amendment. This is something that all of you people say you love law enforcement. Why would you not support this amendment? Can anybody explain why you won't support this? And there was crickets, total silence. I think I might post the clip on social today. They couldn't answer it. The only reason they're voting against it is because it came from a Democrat or because I'm a frontliner. That's it. They don't want to let us have any little things, victories that are victories for our constituents and victories for the American people. So it's very partisan. They're just barreling through, using their power as a majority. There's one crazy thing that just Tom Swazi was talking about. I know he was on here yesterday or recently. He was talking about in the Ways and Means markup, where they're sneaking little things in there, like they're eliminating a fee for, since 1934, if you were buying what they considered, and I think it's in the language of the text, mafia-esque weapons like silencers, you had to pay an extra fee. They're eliminating that. So they're just cutting the revenue that we get for that and making it, helping people buy silencers for weapons. I mean, this is crazy stuff that's going on here right now. But I mean, it's a steady diet of crazy every single day here in Washington.
I mean, listen, I've been here since 1992, and Gingrich came and they won the House in 94. So we've had this kind of militant right-wing leadership in the House for, virtually the whole time I've been here when they've been in power. But this is what we're witnessing here is beyond anything that any of us have ever seen before. I mean, we're operating in a place of such bad faith, I think, in addition to partisanship. I mean, there's just this sort of just incredible bad faith. I mean, today, the speaker was asked about Trump's plane, and he said he's not following it. He doesn't know what's going on with it, right? I mean, and it's obvious that that's not true. And so what do you think? I mean, do you think they're going to be able to pass the reconciliation bill next week? I know you can't predict the future, but I mean, the SALT battle is going on. The conservatives don't think there isn't enough. They want to cut spending more. They want to cut Medicaid more. You've got the Battleground Republicans, they ended up making it look like they weren't really cutting Medicaid as much, but they actually really are, right? They just did it in sort of an ingenious way. I mean, where do you think this goes over the next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think the SALT battle is interesting because, I'm on the bipartisan SALT caucus. I've been advocating for day one that we need a full repeal. This really hurts folks in my district. One of the first things I did was testify before the Ways and Means Committee when they have members. If you're not on the committee, you can come and testify. Talk about how, this is sometimes disparaged as like just another gift to super wealthy people. But in my district, this is helping where we pay high taxes. It's helping teachers. It's helping union members. It's helping middle class and working class folks because they really can deduct a significant amount from their taxes and their tax bill. And so I co-sponsored legislation with Garbarino to reinstate the full deduction. And so our Republican members from New York are digging in on this, and they've promised their constituents that they're going to deliver. So if we don't see right now, what came out of markup is only raising the cap to $30,000, which is not going to make all our constituents whole. So they seem to be digging in, but what I've seen in this Congress is there are holdouts. When we were called to vote on the budget the first time it came around, and then the reconciliation bill that came out of the Senate, what happened was when the first time they pulled the vote because they didn't have the votes to get it passed, and then people got summoned, I think, to the White House, and then all of a sudden they called us all back to vote because they had the votes and they couldn't let any time for anybody to change their mind. So they called us all back and they got it through. And so that's happened every time this bill has come along. There have been some holdouts, but eventually they go along with it. So I'm expecting that, my expectation is probably that's what's going to ultimately happen. And this bill will go forward.
It is, I mean, what's amazing is that a new poll was released today by a new poll that's been created by a guy that used to run 538, a guy named G. Elliott Morris. And the opposition to the Medicaid cuts in this poll, I think it only polled at 15% that agreed with the Medicaid cuts. And also, and you probably haven't seen this because you guys have been working today, but they had congressional generic, the will you vote Democrat or Republican for Congress, and it was 47 Democrat, 41 Republican. We were up 6 points. And, there hasn't been that much. And it's just in this poll was just an incredible amount of just bad news and how out of position they are with voters and how much voters are becoming aware of what the fundamental transaction is, right? I mean, I describe it as, Trump's economic strategy. He wants you to pay more and get less, right? They want them to get more and all of us to get less, right? And all this, and voters are starting to really figure out that they are really there for themselves and not for all of us. And I will tell you, Congresswoman, I mean, what happened in 2018, because I was the lead strategist for the DCCC in that cycle, outside strategist, not inside, but outside. It was during this time, spring, summer, fall of 2017, when we won the election, because through the fight over the ACA, they told the country who they were. And I feel like we're starting to see that now all over again because they're going to have to come back and vote on a Senate bill, right? Because the Senate's going to rewrite it, and so we're going to go through a whole nother process like this all over again. They're going to spend the next 2 months living in a place where they have to defend, legislatively every day this tax, huge tax cuts for billionaires, cuts for everyday people, exploding the deficit in a way that risks the financial integrity of the United States. And this is going to be the front page news for the next 2 to 3 months. And the die is cast on that now. And so I do think we have incredible messaging opportunity. And I'm wondering how this is, have you been able to do town halls and things back in the district? What's the response you've had back home on this?
So first of all, to your point, that sounds like they're in a tough spot, and they are, but we cannot be comfortable that there's going to be a blue wave in 26 like there was in 18. We cannot be comfortable about that. Like, if you watch January 6th, you never thought Trump would come back and be in the White House again. And guess what? That's where he is. So I am at the front of the front line. They are coming for my seat. My message is we do not win back the House by subtraction, only by addition. So I need to hold my seat. I'm from a very purple district. That's why I was a red to blue candidate. That's why I'm a frontline candidate. So my job right now is to make sure I'm meeting my voters where they are. I still have people in my district who think, oh, he's just shaking things up. Talking to them about the real life impact of these things, not in broad strokes, but in nitty gritty. I went in and talked to some veterans in my district, and in the most Republican, reddest part of my district. And they started out with like, why do you guys just hate Trump? And why do Democrats only want to fight with Republicans? And so I entertained their questions, and then we broke it down on what was happening and what some of the impacts on Medicaid would have for them and for veterans, and some of the cuts that we've seen in various programs, the World Trade Center health program. And once I started talking to them just in factual terms, they started getting it. So Simon, you said people are starting to get it. So I think it's really important that we continue to convey these messages, cuts to Medicaid. I'm trying to go out and talk to folks in my district and say, look, this impacts everybody. You think that's just a nice, democratic, feel good, give away government resources to people who aren't working. That's not what it is. These are the people who are helped by Medicaid. And guess what? All you wealthy people who have elderly parents, we know that there's a whole practice area of law called elder law that is designed to make your elderly parents qualify for Medicaid so they can use Medicaid to pay for their nursing homes. And if Medicaid goes away, Are you ready to pay the bill that it's going to be staggering? That's why most people in nursing homes are paid for by Medicaid. And if you ask any health insurance executive, if these cuts go through, guess what? Your private insurance is going to be more
Yeah.
expensive. So
Yeah.
the pain is going to be felt by everybody, not just they're trying to make it like, oh, it's just some fraudsters who we're going to just like kick off the rolls. That is what they're trying to posture to defend these cuts, but that is way out of touch with reality. So I have been doing town halls and trying to lay things out in a fact-laden presentation to the folks in my district. So it doesn't matter what party you are, what your persuasion is. These are the facts. And Tom Swazi, who you had on recently,
Yeah.
we both share Nassau County. I mean, he has a little bit of Queens too. So we've been doing joint presentations. We did one on the budget bill when it first got passed, and we said, look, listen, these are the people in my district. He said the people in his district who are on Medicaid right now, but don't just take our word for it. We brought in the CEO of the largest healthcare network on Long Island, Northwell Health, to come and talk about how devastating the Medicaid cuts would be to the healthcare system writ large. We brought in the CEO of the largest nonprofit for people with disabilities. That's an area that we're not hearing a lot about, but the cuts will be devastating to folks who have family members who live with disabilities, people with autism who need Medicaid coverage going into adulthood. And think about, we had a mother of an adult autistic son talk about how fearful she was about what would happen to her son after she wasn't around anymore. And where would the safety net be for him? It might be pulled away. And then she's going to have to worry, how is my son going to survive after I'm gone? We brought in the CEO of the largest food pantry on Long Island, Island Harvest, talking about how food insecurity has gone up dramatically since COVID. And now, if people can't afford their healthcare, they're going to be relying on food banks when grants are being cut, and they're not going to have the resources to feed all the people who have that need. So when we presented it in this fashion, it's easy for people to digest. I mean, the message is hard to digest, but it's easy for them to break down how this will impact their lives and how it will impact their neighbors and their community at large. And we did the same thing with Social Security. We brought in Martin O'Malley, who was the commissioner
Yeah.
of Social Security, and he was great. We talked about, listen, again, these are just facts. This is not us saying, oh, we're Democrats, they're Republicans, they're bad, and we're good. This is about what is happening right now at Social Security. I had met with a number of union folks, federal employees, who just the day before we were having the presentation, and they were talking about how the cuts and the mass firings in Social Security is having a devastating impact there. And our colleagues on the other side aren't being honest. Nick LaLota criticized Tom and my presentation on Social Security and said that we were fear mongering. And he said nobody has ever called his office complaining about Social Security. That's simply not true.
Yeah, I know. That's the silliest thing anyone's ever said. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I do think it's great to hear about what you're doing back in the district, because part of what I was getting at is that I think that in the next few months, the opportunity for you to play off the news back in the district and explain, because it's not going to disappear, right? This is going to be, they're going to, because of the nature of the reconciliation process, this is going to be front and center in the news for the next, 2 months and 10 weeks, meaning that we've got this big opportunity to go educate folks about what they're doing, and there's no way for them to run away from it. And this is exactly what happened with the ACA back in 2017, which is that because it took so long for them to get through the process, we had this incredible opening for months and months and months to go back home and talk to voters about what they were trying to do. And so these kinds of meetings that you're talking about, I think, are really important for helping bring people along to understand the reality of what they're doing. Because I do think that part of what the Republicans benefit from sometimes is this normalcy bias that we all have. It's like, well, they can't really be doing that, right? They're not really, Trump's not really taking a $400 million plane from Qatar, right? Or he's not really, there's a little bit of that goes on and I think to your point, all of you have been given a gift in some ways over the next 8 to 10 weeks where You can just go home, continue to educate. It's in the front page of the news. People are seeing members of Congress falling asleep. They want to know what's going on, right? And we've got a very powerful story to tell. And so, it's for a freshman member who needs this ability to go back and connect with your community, right? This is an incredible opportunity for you. And it's great to hear that you're taking advantage of it. Anything else that's just on your mind in your early days here during this crazy time that you're here that you want to share with all of us before we go? Because I know it's a busy time.
Sure. Well, look, I when I came and joined Congress as a freshman, in new member orientation, they have a lot of orientation events, dinners and lunches where you can go meet with folks on the other side. Then they have a program where freshmen are invited to go to Harvard to listen to policy experts talk on various topics, AI, the economy, tax policy, things like that. And again, every meal you're eating with Republicans and Democrats together at the same table. And I really made a point to get to know my colleagues on the other side, because if you look at the floor, we really are on separate sides. The Republicans sit on one side, the Democrats sit on the other side, and it's easy to get put into that bubble where you're not talking to folks on the other side. I did a little video this morning about a bipartisan bill I'm doing with Congressman Begich from Alaska about youth suicide prevention. I'm working really hard to try to find places for common ground, even in this insane, crazy Congress, so I can actually get something done to help people, because that's why we're sent here. But the process that I just described, where I'm putting forward an amendment that if it was a Republican putting it forward, every single Republican would vote for it, but they're not voting for it because it's a Democrat putting it forward. And I wasn't here when we were in the majority. Possibly we did the same thing on our side, but that's not functioning government. That's not why people sent us here. I'm hoping that once we get through this crazy, insane moment in our nation's history, we can go back to common sense and common ground and actually doing what people send us here for, which is to make their lives better. That is not what's happening right now. I think in this election, there was this misconception that, we saw this president win over working class folks who had historically always been with Democrats, because, like it or not, he messaged better on the issues that they cared about and they put trust in him. Well, he's not delivering for them, but it's our responsibility, particularly us in his elected office, but all of us who want to see change, to make sure that we are talking to folks, not lecturing folks. The Democrats get a bad reputation for over intellectualizing and lecturing people. That's why I'm always very careful to ask people questions. I had people when back in the beginning, when the first big blow was just totally wiping out US aid, I met someone in my district and they said, oh, I'm glad the president's doing this. It's a good thing. And I said, okay, why do you think it's a good thing? Not you're wrong, Republicans are bad, I'm not saying anything like that. Why do you think it's a good thing? Well, we send too much money overseas that we don't get back, and other people should be paying. I said, okay, well, one of the things that we do that USAID can help, for example, is like contain really bad diseases. So how do you feel about Ebola virus? You want that coming to the United States? So no, I actually don't. And then I started talking about how also the aid, when you have nations with food insecurity and water insecurity, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled. And part of what we're doing is filling that vacuum so that it's not filled by somebody else, a bad actor. And if we are leaving, and we're leaving these food insecure, water insecure nations, who's going to come along? China, Russia. Is that good for our national security? No. So now I'm reaching them on points that maybe are more right sounding points, but it's persuasive. And then they say, oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe that's not a good thing. So each of us can have our role as an evangelist for what the Democratic Party stands for and how we actually want to get the job and make people's lives better. And so thank you to everybody who's engaged enough to be on this Zoom. Please, let's keep in touch. Please help me stay in Congress. We don't want to have subtraction. And also use this opportunity when you're talking to your friends and neighbors, to make sure that we're driving home how devastating these cuts will be, and how, not just this budget, not just Medicaid, but all the different things that are going on, all the cuts to the arts, killing Elmo. I mean, like, it just doesn't end.
Yeah, listen, I know you got to go, and so just thank you for your passion and for your grit and your fight. And this is a time where we all have to stand and be counted. And I also take your admonition that we can't. Trump is like Houdini in some ways. Like he somehow manages to get out of things. And that he's building a Death Star. I mean, part of what I've been starting to talk about is that he's raising hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in order to make sure that you lose so that he doesn't have get impeached and get investigated again. So, he is going to play hardball in it. He and Elon and the oligarchs are going to spend whatever it takes to keep the Republicans in power in Congress. And this is and it's going to be, we've had a financial advantage in these House races in recent elections. I don't know that we're going to have that this time.
It's
And
very scary as a
yeah,
frontliner
yeah.
to see the amount of money that they are raising to use against me and to use against all my colleagues.
Yeah, it is. And this hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but because Trump's raising a lot of the money into his own committee. And one of the things that everyone needs to realize is that, look, Trump may be a wild and crazy guy and all the things that he is, but he had serious professionals running his campaign. And, they beat us in the election. I mean, these were serious people, and those people are going to run his super PAC and, are going to be involved in spending hundreds of millions of dollars against the frontliners, against our Senate candidates. And I think we're going to have to start soon, starting to like accept the reality of that and really doing what we can to get you early money so that you can, start spending and start getting ahead and, continuing to lay the groundwork for your reelection. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's an important thing. We haven't really talked about it as much as I probably need to. So I appreciate your pushing on that. And listen, just it's been great to be on your team. I'm really proud of you and we're everyone we need to, we've got you can just go to the Hopium site, one click, 7 amazing candidates. It's easy as pie, right? And let's get going and make sure these intrepid 7 House members that we've endorsed get off to a strong start and so they can come back here. And as you said, we have to build through addition, not subtraction, right?
Right. And my last final pitch is if there is no backlash to Donald Trump for all the things that he's done, there'll be no stopping him.
I know. And that's part of the reason why the kind of stuff you're doing back home. I mean, one of the things I can just tell you, Congresswoman, is somebody who works across the country and our community is, national, is that the number of town halls, this whole idea of a town hall has become a thing and it's happening all over the country. It's can be, you know, two indivisible groups and a Democratic Party group doing it here and another group doing it there. There is so much dialogue happening across the United States right now about what's happening to us that it feels I'm blessed to be able to see the reports on this every day in the Hopium community. But it is amazing how much the American people are talking to each other right now about
Yep.
everything, and just like what you're doing back in your district. And I do think this is we need to keep talking to each other and having these conversations in local communities, driven by local leaders. And this is one of the most powerful tools that we have that I don't think the Republicans really understand the significance of what's happening on the ground. And because people are worried, I mean, they're really worried. And
They
so,
definitely will.
okay, keep fighting. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you,
And
everybody.
okay, see ya. Take care,
Bye.
everybody. Bye bye.